Hello, potential friends and adventurers. I'm Em, and today we're going to talk about allowing your players to surrender. Welcome to the DM table. So, why would you want to encourage your players to surrender occasionally? Well, sometimes you want to show that they shouldn't run over everything with force. You don't want them to bully everything with their physical and not so physical might, would you? You sometimes want to demonstrate that things are not worth fighting, that the players would be in the wrong for fighting this thing, or it's too tough, it's not reasonable to challenge it. And sometimes you want to illustrate this without casualties. So, making players surrender is pretty good. But how to do it without it seeming artificial, or even being artificial? Well, for one thing, have opponents do it pretty frequently. I mean, there shouldn't be that many battles to extermination in the first place. Nobody really wants that, so opponents shouldn't want it for themselves to be exterminated, so have them surrender if they're unlikely to be able to run, and have them do so whenever it would be at all better for them than the alternative, and that they could make such a decision where they could believe that it would at least somewhat work out to their favor. And I did hear some people having some problems with prisoners, essentially. And I say they shouldn't be acquiring so many prisoners. After all, they should get the message loud and clear that most of these people will leave and maybe even rethink their life. At least somewhat, maybe. Anyways, they will leave and party will essentially never hear from them again, most likely. So why even keep them prisoners? Take their loot, take their equipment, take their money, and let them live and leave. And so you wouldn't have any prisoners. And if party likes taking prisoners and say if they're pretty grim and like torturing them or whatever, well, it depends on what you want for the tone. You can let it happen, or you can sort of ask them about the tone and so on and so forth. But if there are prisoner problems in a campaign, that usually either speaks to lack of direction from the party or speaks of bigger problems. If they just don't want to play along with your tone if you didn't plan an evil campaign and they keep playing an evil campaign, then you have bigger problems than prisoners because players are actively trying to spoil the campaign, so it's not the prisoners that are the issue. And I do mean people can play an evil campaign if you all agree, and it could be fun. I'm just saying that they shouldn't try to deliberately disgust and displease other players around the table repeatedly, deliberately, because, that's not nice. You're here to be friends and play together. You're not supposed to just annoy each other deliberately and make that sort of thing. So, whether it's a good or evil campaign, you want to help players that are clueless what to do with strong enough hints of this isn't an issue. You don't need to keep prisoners, you don't need to be, that careful about it, because if you have a logical method of releasing them, then you could. Now, sometimes players might hesitate because, the person could call for reinforcements or so on. But you could have even the opponents tell them, if you tie us up well here, there's no passing patrols, we won't be able to escape until days pass, or something like that. Or you may say it, you can say, well, if you tie them up here, they won't be able to do that, and they probably won't be able to escape, and if you do this, that should probably be the truth. You shouldn't misinform or mislead your party with these things, but if there's a simple solution and they're not thinking of it, but they would otherwise in that world because of more experience with these sort of things, then you can tell them they should know. They could think it up and they have more experience with it, so their characters are aware of it. And so you're not spoiling it for them. Well, This shouldn't also be so much of an issue for the reason that there shouldn't be that many enemies surrendering. They should try to run, they should try to do other things, but they do surrender whenever surrender is the best option, so keep that in mind, and there you go. You can have essentially demonstrations of how this is done. And now, also, when it's turn for the players, you can have it offered to them. Sometimes enemies will essentially tell the players that they would accept surrender at this point, and they can even state the conditions, because this is easy solution for both sides sometimes. Well, not so easy for one side, but still, the other side wants to terminate the battle earlier before more people are injured, more resources are spent, more spells are expended, more, whatever resources are being spent, and as such, the side that is spending them, which is usually each side, doesn't want to do it more than is reasonable. Because, again, fighting further is reasonless. And sometimes even pretty dangerous, pretty evil enemies won't do, unspeakable things to your players just because they captured them, because they don't necessarily have the time or the inclination. Sometimes it's good enough to just take all of the equipment from your party. Just imagine how much that is sometimes. That's already sufficiently big of a deal to make most opposition happy. But if not, well, there are other things, but it doesn't always have to end in pretty grim and dark situations to that point. I mean, players will already be heavily annoyed, I believe, by losing all equipment, but it's billions of times better than losing your character, so there's that advantage. And let's not forget, sometimes battle is even easily just a deterrent. Opponents want just party maybe to, at an equal point, surrender and leave, going another direction, without anybody taking anything from anybody, because they didn't per se conclusively win. They just made them surrender and not pursue the battle, not injure anybody further, and not follow that path. Now, party may accept this because maybe they have a different path that they're gonna take. Maybe they just deal with the loss, but they don't lose anything essentially except the quest has failed, which is kind of excellent, because now you have failure without complete game over consequence. So that's excellent option to have as a DM. And so the players can offer all these things to the enemies as well, and now you're having much more dynamic situations occur from these combats, where you can have quests and campaigns just sort of spring from them, and more information is found out, more stories exposed, and battles are more meaningful, because they're not 1 and 0 states. They're not kill or be killed all the time, all the way. There's definitely then more to it than that, and now you have more width to serve different level challenges. You can have more challenging, less challenging, you can have all kinds of different enemies which have wider variety of levels and wider variety of things to do, and therefore party will not know that easily when and how they'll be fighting the next challenge. How challenging will it be? They'll become more reasonable and rational about combat, and they'll act more realistically. So I see all this as very positive throughout the list. And now that you have that, well, you can even have, when they get used to it, objectives built into the fight from outside of the fight, especially in military campaigns and similar. You can have players hear about an objective that is not your usual fight to the extermination, but rather some sort of complexer mission that involves fighting, but involves deterrence, captures, getting past layers and layers of opposition with spending as little resources as possible. Sneaking then comes into play, and so on and so forth. From here on, you can plan further what you will, and I'll leave it to you. So tell me, adventurer, if this was unique, and maybe then you could spare a click, and I could see you here each and every week. See you then. Bye.